a lament for East Germany. When I first saw this, I actually laughed out loud.
It's not what you expect to see, is it? Like, who's going around lamenting East Germany these days?
Right. Of all the things to be nostalgic for,
Okay.
but this deep dive takes us down some seriously strange paths.
Well, that's what makes it so interesting, right? I mean, who wants to hear about the stuff everyone already knows?
True enough, I guess.
This is some seriously obscure stuff we're getting into here.
And to make it even weirder, the article we're looking at is written from a self-described orthodox monarchist perspective.
Okay, so already starting off with a bit of a paradox there, right?
Yeah, talk about a curveball.
An orthodox monarchist feeling nostalgic for East Germany. It's like, what do you even...
I know, right? You'd expect them to be, I don't know, praising the Tsar or something.
Yeah, you'd think so. But no, they're over here lamenting the fall of the Berlin Wall.
It's wild, and it gets even better because then they hit us with this bombshell. They see East Germany as this, like, bastion of conservatism.
Which on the surface seems completely insane.
Yeah, my first thought was, did they miss the whole Cold War thing?
Right, like weren't we always told that the West was the land of freedom and free love and East Germany was all about repression?
Exactly.
Mm.
But this author is arguing that East Germany, at least in those early years under Stalin, was actually more socially conservative than the West in some pretty shocking ways.
Like way stricter stances on homosexuality, prostitution, even pornography.
Hold on, are we really comparing anything about Stalin to social progress?
No, of course not. It's just about understanding the context, you know? Like, what were the prevailing attitudes and laws back then?
And what was Stalin's deal anyway? Why so focused on controlling people's personal lives?
Well, power, mostly.
Powerhouse so.
This was a guy obsessed with control. He saw anything that didn't fit his very narrow view of society as a threat, something that could weaken his grip.
So cracking down on things like homosexuality was more about maintaining that control than any deeply held beliefs?
Exactly. He was all about projecting an image of strength, of unity. And anything that challenged that image, even personal behavior, was seen as a liability.
It's kind of chilling when you think about it.
Yeah, it's a dark chapter, for sure. But it's important to remember that this kind of social conservatism wasn't unique to the Soviet Union. Many countries had similar laws and attitudes at that time.
So this author isn't praising Stalin, they're just pointing out this unexpected contrast between East and West Germany during that time.
Exactly. But here's where it gets even more interesting. They argue that this social conservatism wasn't the only area where East Germany diverged from the Soviet mold. They also suggest that East Germany held on to a stronger sense of national identity than even West Germany.
Wait, really? I always thought East Germany was just seen as a satellite state of the USSR, a kind of mini Russia.
That's the common perception,
Right.
right? But the author points out that while the Soviet Union itself tried to suppress nationalism in favor of this pan-Soviet identity, they were actually more tolerant of it in some of the satellite states.
Which is a bit of a head-scratcher. If they were so opposed to nationalism, why allow it to flourish anywhere?
It's complicated. The author suggests that the Soviets saw these expressions of national identity as less threatening than genuine political dissent. It was a way of letting off steam, so to speak.
So as long as you were waving the East German flag instead of the American flag, you were okay.
Essentially, yes. But here's the irony. The author argues that in a roundabout way, the Soviets actually helped preserve a stronger sense of German identity in the East.
Because they shielded them from Western influence.
Exactly. The author sees West Germany, on the other hand, as having been pressured by the Allies to confront its past, to atone for its sins, which led to a kind of cultural amnesia.
So instead of just purging the Nazi ideology, they ended up throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
That's the author's argument, and it's a controversial one, to say the least. They even go so far as to say that the Third Reich was the last truly free and authentic German state, which is a whole other can of worms.
Wow. Okay, so we're definitely in tricky territory here.
We are, and it's crucial to be really careful about how we approach this. The author is walking a very fine line, trying to separate what they see as authentic German traditions from the horrors of the Nazi regime.
It feels like they're trying to claim the good without acknowledging the bad, which, let's be honest, is pretty much impossible when you're talking about Nazi Germany.
Exactly. But this distinction, this attempt to separate the wheat from the chaff, is at the heart of the author's lament for East Germany. They seem to be mourning the loss of a certain kind of Germany, one that they believe could have been a model for the world if it hadn't been for, well, everything.
A Germany that embodied those authentic traditions, but without, the genocide and World War part.
It's a fantasy, of course.
Yeah.
But like all good fantasies, it speaks to a deeper longing, a desire for a world that feels lost, irretrievable. And that's what makes this whole lament for East Germany so fascinating.
Okay, so we've got this author with, let's just say, unique take on East Germany.
Unique is one word for it.
But I'm still stuck on this whole conservative haven thing.
Yeah.
Like, didn't East Germany have universal health care and state-sponsored childcare?
Right. Not exactly what you picture when you think conservative.
Exactly.
It's true. The author is really focusing on those culture wars issues, the hot button topics like sexuality, family structure, censorship, that kind of thing.
Which I gotta say feels kind of weird to focus on when you're talking about a regime that was, totalitarian.
Yeah, it's a fair point. You can't just ignore the political context. But remember, we're trying to understand this author's perspective here, even if it seems strange, and they seem to be arguing that East Germany, even with all its problems, managed to hold on to certain social structures that were disappearing in the West.
So less about praising the regime, more about mourning what they see as the West's moral decline.
Exactly. And they use family structure as an example. They even talk about how family life was changing under the USSR, especially for women. But they're contrasting that with what they see as the breakdown of the traditional family in the West.
So they're not saying life under the Soviets was perfect, but they are pointing to a difference in values.
And they connect that to their point about national identity. They say that because East Germany was cut off from the West, they kept a stronger sense of tradition, of connection to their past.
Which to them made East Germany more authentically German.
Exactly. It's like they're saying West Germany tried so hard to become democratic and get away from its past that it lost something important along the way.
That's quite a claim.
Mm-hmm.
But even if we believe that for a second, wasn't East Germany still massively influenced by Soviet culture? I mean, they were occupied for decades.
They were, and the article doesn't deny that. But the author is making a distinction between political control and cultural influence. They're saying that even though the Soviets controlled their government, they didn't completely erase East German culture.
So it's like you could be forced to live under communism, but still hold on to your Christmas traditions or whatever.
In a way, yes. And they even say that this mix of German and Soviet cultures wasn't all bad. They use East Germany's national anthem as an example. Auferstanden aus Ruinen.
Okay, and what's so special about the anthem?
Well, the title means risen from ruins, which meant a lot to East Germans after World War II.
So it's a song about rebuilding, about starting over.
Exactly. But the author sees something deeper. They say it also reflects this idea of a new Germany rising up, a Germany that learned from its mistakes and wanted to be better.
But wouldn't that apply to both East and West Germany? They both had to rebuild after the war?
True, but the author's saying that East Germany had to confront its past in a different way, so they came out of it with a stronger sense of purpose.
Interesting take, even if it's a bit idealized. But let's be real for a second. Are we supposed to believe that East Germany under Soviet rule was this utopia of happy families and national pride? The Berlin Wall kind of puts a damper on that image, don't you think?
Of course, and the author's not saying East Germany was perfect. They know about the repression, the lack of freedom, the economic problems. But they want us to see beyond those things, to consider the possibilities, the what-ifs, the road not taken.
Okay, I get that. It's about challenging our assumptions, looking for the unexpected. But I still have questions.
Yeah?
Like, if East Germany was so great, why were so many people risking their lives to escape to the West?
Now that's the big question, isn't it? And it's something we need to really unpack, because if we want to get this whole lament for East Germany, we have to understand what it was actually like to live there, the good and the bad.
So we've been talking about this lost Germany, this road not taken. But is this author really lamenting East Germany itself? Or are they more focused on what they see as the West messing everything up?
I think it's both. It's like East Germany is this blank slate onto which they're projecting all their anxieties about the West.
Like a stand-in for a simpler time.
Exactly. They even use this word Sehnsucht, which I had to look up.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that word in my life.
Me neither. But it's more than just nostalgia. It's like this deep yearning for something you can't quite put your finger on.
And they're saying East Germany represents that something.
In a way, yeah. They're saying that by suppressing so much of modern life, the Soviets accidentally created a space where those older traditions could survive.
Hold on, so they're saying communism was good for preserving German culture.
Well, that's the provocative part. It's not that they're praising communism, but they're pointing out this ironic consequence.
That makes sense. They're all about irony, this author.
It's true. But I think what they're getting at is this idea that progress isn't always a straight line. sometimes we lose things along the way.
It's like you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
for this author, what's gone is a sense of belonging, of connection to something bigger than themselves. They see that in East Germany, at least in their idealized version of it.
Which brings us back to that line about the spirit of Soviet Prussia, offering an alternative to the West.
And that's where things get really sticky. Because on the one hand, you can see where they're coming from, this desire for a more meaningful way of life. But then you've got Soviet Prussia, which isn't exactly the most appealing term.
It's pretty loaded, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not exactly synonymous with freedom and democracy.
Definitely not. And
Yeah.
that's where this whole lament starts to fall apart, because you can't just romanticize away the realities of history, the suffering that happened under these regimes.
Right. So where does that leave us? What are we supposed to do with this bizarre kind of nostalgic for a country that most people would rather just forget about?
I think the real takeaway is the questions it makes us ask. Like, what are we willing to sacrifice in the name of progress? And what happens when we try to romanticize the past? These are questions that go way beyond East Germany. They're relevant to all of us right now.
So maybe this isn't just a lament for East Germany. Maybe it's a lament for something we've all lost, this sense of connection and purpose.
Maybe. And by exploring those feelings of loss, by really sitting with them, we might just find a way to create a better future.
A future that's less about dwelling on the past and more about building something new.
Now that's something worth striving for.
It really is. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder those big questions about history, identity, and what it means to belong. Until next time, keep exploring those hidden corners of history and keep asking those tough questions. You never know what you might discover.